You've all seen the meme, right? The preachy, judgmental, angry vegan. It's a stereotype that's so powerful, it's practically a cultural icon. But what if there's more to it than just a caricature? Today, we're going to dig into the real psychology behind this whole flashpoint, the genuine anger, the fierce defensiveness, and the deep, deep convictions that are fueling this whole thing. And I mean, this isn't just about some heated arguments online. This tension can spill over into the real world in some pretty terrifying ways. I mean, get this story from Psychology Today. A woman in Canada was literally run off the road aggressively and had meat thrown at her car. Why? Because of her pro-vegan bumper stickers. She was terrified for her family's safety. This is way more than a simple disagreement. For some people, it's basically a declaration of war. So what is really going on here? Let's approach this like an investigation. We're going to follow the psychological breadcrumbs to figure out why this stereotype is so powerful and maybe what it reveals about, well, all of us. And look, this hostility isn't just a few random incidents. A study by McInnes and Hodgson found something truly shocking. They discovered that the level of prejudice some meat eaters have against vegans is just as strong as the prejudice felt towards immigrants. And listen to this. In some cases, it was even more negative than the prejudice expressed toward Black people. Wow. I mean, that just takes this way beyond a simple food debate and into something much deeper, a really powerful, deep-seated bias. Okay, so where does this so-called anger actually come from? To really get it, we have to do something a little radical. We need to step inside the worldview of an ethical vegan for a minute and try to see the world through their eyes. So just imagine this for a second. What if every single day you looked around at our modern world, at the grocery stores, restaurant menus, TV commercials, and instead of seeing normalcy, you saw a full-blown, functioning dystopia? You know, there's actually a term for this profound sense of distress. It's called vistopia. Researchers define it as this existential crisis that a vegan feels when they suddenly become aware that they are living in a world built on a system they find absolutely horrifying, a system that pretty much everyone else seems to be totally fine with, almost like they're in a trance. And this isn't just some vague sadness either. The research breaks it down into 4 distinct themes. First, you've got the constant strain on your relationships with friends and family. Then, there's this crushing sense of pessimism about humanity. On top of that, you're faced with the daily, gut-wrenching sight of animals being treated like products. And finally, there's this feeling of being completely trapped in a system that thinks all of this is perfectly normal. And let's be absolutely crystal clear here. This profound distress has nothing to do with what someone's eating, or nutrition, or anything like that. The research is really emphatic that this is a psychological state born from moral frustration. It's the sheer anguish of living in a world that, to you, just feels fundamentally and systemically wrong. So when you feel that intensely, it naturally leads to a desire for change. But how you create that change, well, that is a huge source of debate within the vegan movement itself. Is expressing all that anger a useful tool, or is it just a trap? This debate really splits the movement into 2 main camps. On one side, you have strategists like Tobias Leinert. He basically says that even if the anger is justified, it's just bad strategy. It just pushes people away. But then, on the other side, you have thinkers like J.C. Rees-Anthus, who argue that no, confrontation isn't just useful, it's absolutely essential for waking up a society that's fast asleep. Leinert's argument is super pragmatic. He puts it like this. I don't think a car salesperson ever sold a car being angry at their customers. He's saying that, like it or not, advocates are trying to sell a message of compassion. And you just can't do that by being mad at your potential customers. For him, it's all about being effective, not just being right. And this, on the other hand, looks to the history of social justice. He actually cites Martin Luther King Jr., arguing that real progress often requires creating a crisis. This constructive, non-violent tension, as King called it, is what forces a community that refuses to talk about a problem to finally face it head-on. And you can see this whole debate play out across all the different tactics that activists use. Anthus breaks them down into 3 main types. You've got your classic direct confrontation, protests, marches. Then there's what he calls consumer action, like handing out leaflets. And then you have triggering events. Think of those shocking undercover investigation videos or books that just grab the public by the collar and force them to look. Each one has its own risks and its own rewards. Okay, so we've looked at it from the vegan perspective. Now let's flip the coin. Because it's not just about what vegans do, it's about how the rest of us react. Why does this topic seem to hit such a raw nerve and trigger such powerful defensive reactions in people? This is where the psychology gets really, really interesting. Research shows that the biggest backlash isn't aimed at people who go vegan for their health or even for the environment. Nope. The real hostility is reserved for people who say they do it for animal welfare. Now, that is a huge clue. It tells us this isn't just a disagreement. It's a deeply motivated, defensive reaction. So why get so defensive? Well, there's a psychological concept called system justification that gives us a pretty good answer. Essentially, our brains are hardwired to defend the status quo. We have this powerful subconscious need to believe that the systems we're a part of, especially something as basic as our food system, are good and just. So an ethical vegan, just by existing, poses this unspoken moral challenge to that entire system, and by extension, a challenge to our own choices. And the research connects these dots perfectly. It finds that anti-vegan prejudice is highest among people who see veganism as a threat to their culture and traditions, people who eat more beef themselves, and people with a more conservative political ideology. It's all pointing to the same thing. It's a defense of a system that is deeply, deeply woven into our personal identities and our daily lives. So, given this complete psychological minefield on both sides, how on earth can anyone have a productive conversation about this stuff? How do we navigate all the anger and defensiveness to actually talk about what matters? Well, writer Georgia Bamber has some incredibly practical advice. The golden rule? It's simple. Just don't start the conversation while people are in the middle of a meal. From there, it's about knowing who you're talking to. If they're a fitness buff, maybe talk about health benefits. But maybe the most important rule of all, try to have a conversation, not deliver a lecture. Ask questions and actually listen. And Bamber's most powerful piece of advice might be to switch from dropping facts to sharing feelings. She argues that the best way to really connect with someone is through your own personal story. By remembering your own journey, what it was like before you were vegan, you can find that common ground, build a bridge of empathy, and turn what could be an argument into a genuine connection. Ultimately, what this all comes down to is that central tension we saw earlier. For any cause, the real challenge isn't just about having the moral high ground or proving you're right, it's about figuring out how to actually be effective in persuading other people. Which leaves us with a final question that honestly goes way beyond veganism. For any cause you feel passionately about, whether it's political, social, or personal, how do you balance that fire of your conviction with the delicate and often difficult art of persuasion? That right there is the challenge for anyone who really wants to change the world.